up open ears, let your mind go. Pop anonymous, y'all, breaking down the dough.
Yeah. Hey, what's good, everybody? This is Propaganda Anonymous, and you are tuned in to the Anon podcast. Join me as I explore topics discussed in the work of Robert Anton Wilson and interview some of the coolest people in the world. What do we talk about on the Anon podcast? We talk story. We talk symbolic anthropology, crime and criminology, alternative reality games and UFOs. We talk conspiracy theory, comedy, comic books and quantum physics, liberation theology, negative theology, terrorism and music, sex, magic and drugs, psychedelics, housing and love. This is the Anon podcast. Tune in.
Open your fucking ears, jackass.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to the first official episode of the Anon podcast. Yeah. In this episode, I talk with Joesph Matheny, transmedia artist and creator of ONSAT, the first internet-based conspiracy theory and the first alternative reality game. So many firsts that come out of Matheny's mind. He's someone that needs to be listened to, I think, these days. And I'm really happy that I got a chance to speak with him, to listen to him unpack alternative reality games from the history of it through ONSAT and then to where it went, this manifestation of QAnon, which is this dark, weaponized, propagandized form of alternative reality game that fed this cult of personality for Donald Trump and was this giant cult. And man, it was so cool listening to Matheny just break it all down because it was simple. And if you can listen to this, you can understand how not to get caught up in some cult-like bullshit. That's important, to attune your bullshit detectors, get them sharp. And when you listen to people like Matheny, you'll understand how to do that. So without further ado, here's my interview with Joesph Matheny. Where did the idea of ONSAT come from?
Well, the first ideas for the type of narrative that ONSAT became started in the 80s for me, pre-internet, but I was already playing around on bulletin board systems, which were kind of the precursor to the internet. Definitely was where I first had my first internet access, was through a bulletin board system. These were prompt-based, usually Unix systems that you would dial into directly, and there would be a bulletin board. I guess the modern equivalent would be like a web board, but this was pre-web, and you would log into this machine, and you would have conversations, threaded conversations with people over a period of time. You know, the web board is really the web's version of a BBS, bulletin board system, but back then, we only had the bulletin board system, no graphics, just straight text. And in looking at that and thinking about all the things I'd been thinking about up to that point, which was a lot of different artistic influences, a lot of different technical influences, a lot of literary influences, I thought, you know, what would be cool is if you could have a book that wasn't just static words on a page, but that actually tied into other types of media, so that if you're reading the book and it references a movie, you could go find that movie and watch the movie. If you're reading the book and it referenced a place, you could go to that place and maybe find some graffiti left behind by the character in the book, you know. And so basically what I was after was breaching the proscenium or breaking the fourth wall, as they say in Hollywood, looking for something that really jumped over from just a standard narrative in a single medium to a narrative that could cross mediums and even cross over into real life, and kind of feel almost like a LARP, which, you know, we were doing LARPs back then, but also we were doing a lot of mail art, and we were doing play-by-mail games. So there was this great convergence in the late 80s, early 90s of all these mediums actually not just referencing each other, but actually having the ability to take the user from the one medium to the other pretty seamlessly. And as time progressed and the internet became something that people could publicly access, and multimedia became something that more and more people were creating, and there was a platform for it, that became even more seamless. So you could go from a phone call to the web to a book to a movie. Like, all these things were more seamless. The movement between the mediums could become more seamless, which for me was important to maintain the experience. Because when you have to step out of the experience, you kind of break the spell, and the theatric ambiance is lost. The immersion effect is lost. So I started trying to put something together as early as the 80s that had that feel, knowing and thinking, well, believing, I shouldn't say not knowing, but believing and thinking that the technology was going to progress soon, and that it would be there to facilitate my vision in its fullness, but I could at least get started with what I had. So ONSAT started as a story that was co-written, and then later I kind of took over the entire thing and just kept adding to it and adding to it. So I guess you could say it was, it was almost Talmudic, in that, stories were added to stories were added to stories. But it started out as like 4 basic stories that all tied together. And it was a book catalog, which really was a series of short stories that was disguised as a book catalog. And then one of the pamphlets in that book catalog, isolated and written, and then 2 interviews with 2 characters from the story that I did. One was with Nick Herbert, the other one was with Emery Cranston, in air quotes. And I started publishing this stuff wherever I could put it. Mail art catalogs, early bulletin board systems, early magazines. A lot of magazines were part of this project. And I was building a backstory for this grand finale, which I wanted to build, which was this kind of multimedia extravagant thing with people that were actors, that were playing characters, that were online. Sometimes it was in person. I would set up like these events where if people went to a certain restaurant on a certain day at a certain time, I would be there in character because I was a character in the story. One time we did a thing at Boulder Creek and Nick Herbert was there and a bunch of people showed up and, he stayed in character. He played, his character, Dr. Jabir. So, over the years, people ask me, what is it? And it's so many different disciplines that are tied together that becomes difficult to really say without rambling for 3 hours. But what I did is I came up with kind of a succinct way to put it, which is it's a art installation made for the new space, which was the internet, which means that it's an art installation that was no longer tethered to time and space. It was an art installation that was timeless and spaceless. It could go anywhere. Anybody from anywhere could interact with it. It basically played out in your head. That was the real medium, was the mind. But the way that it was maintained was through what the later commercial ARG developers called TNAG, or This Is Not a Game, which is, we all know this is a game, but none of us talk about the fact that it's a game. So, it's like that, reminds me of that scene in the movie Ed Wood, where one of the walls wobbles while he's shooting it, and somebody goes, "Don't we want to shoot that again?" And he's like, "Haven't you heard of suspension of disbelief?" We were kind of playing with that concept, which is, we all know this is a game, but none of us are going to have to like ruin the game by talking like when you're in a LARP, right? If you do like a vampire LARP on the streets of Santa Cruz, which we used to do all the time, nobody talked about the fact that it was a LARP while you were LARPing because it ruins the experience for everybody. You're in character, you stay in character until the game is over, then you all go out and get a drink. Or wrestling is another example. Kayfabe, I think they call it, which is the 2 guys in the ring. One's a bad guy, one's a good guy. They already know who's going to win before it starts. They go through the motions. They hate each other. They go off stage. They go out of the ring. They talk crap about each other. Then the cameras go dark. They go out and they get a drink together, right? So politics is like that too, I hear. You know, like congressmen that hate each other actually go drinking together. So, you know, it's all just a thing that people do so that you can have the utmost of the experience in the moment. And that's really what I was after, was this this experiment in medium, which I saw the internet as being the perfect vehicle for. And I was right, unfortunately, too right in some ways, but as it turned out, but I was right, is that it makes this really nice immersive experience. So that's the shortest way I can tell you what it is.
For sure. Yeah. Thanks, man. I mean, there's so much going on. There's such a cohesion of different, media elements. And then when it came out, especially on the early internet, it was so, future anticipatory. You were already, digesting what was to come, which is the role of a true artist, so I tip my cap to you for doing that, and I guess there's one thing that it's hard to describe exactly what it is in some ways, but perhaps we can, speak about the structure of the plot, which itself was so cool, first learning about, because these ARG sort of games, it's the structure of the game itself, but then it's also the plot that drives it, forward in different ways, obviously, like all great fiction. But in terms of very briefly, like, this is my own quick hackneyed breakdown of the Ong's Hat plot, right? And please, interject with other facts about it. But this is what I have. There's a facility headed by renegade Princeton professors who conducted quantum physics, chaos theory experiments, and according to conspiracy theories, discovered a new theory for dimensional travel, utilizing an egg, which was a wild computer interface sort of living thing, it seemed like, totally anticipating we're not even there yet, the future of this internet technology that is still coming, this crazy interaction between our minds and this hardware, right?
Well, much like what Elon Musk is doing now, which is the mind computer interface, which is
Neuralink.
Much more than that. There's other people working on that as well. He's just the most popular character, but I mean, it's much more than that. If you think about it, it's the mind computer interface is the first step of what it really represents, which is the mind network interface, which is if your mind is networked to a computer device that has network access. Okay, what does that mean? Like, now you're part of a giant mind that everybody else is tapped into. And, if you're a dystopian, you're going to go, the Borg. And if you're a utopian, you're going to say it's the Gaia mind, we're facilitating the Gaia mind. So my guess is, because we're human, is probably going to be some of both.
For sure. And I mean, and then the needed capacity for all of us to learn, or, the ability to know the difference between these now, what is propaganda going to look like, and bullshit and disinformation going to look like in this new age of instant.
What does it look like now, dude? It's like, it's unrecognizable at this point.
I mean, this is one of the reasons why I like Robert Anton Wilson so much, as do so many people, is that, again, here was another artist that seemed to be anticipating this ontological crisis, that we're now in. And he had some optimistic hope that humans can utilize their reason and rationality and learn the difference between, wild assertions and claims and proofs, and then this will transduce, hopefully, in terms of watching the internet and things on the internet and where it's going, to be able to tell when something is straight propaganda or something else. I mean, this kind of just quickly segues into a quick discussion of QAnon. Recently read a cool article by Reed Berkowitz, which basically said a game designer's, an ARG designer's take on QAnon. And he mentioned a lot of really interesting things, but the one thing that resonated with me was that he basically said QAnon, though it looks like an alternative reality game, is actually not. it's propaganda that utilized this model and vessel of the alternative reality game.
So it is an alternate reality. I would disagree. I'd say it is. It is an ARG. It's just a weaponized ARG.
Can you, extrapolate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so this is funny. So after 9/11, I saw this really weird hard right turn in the conspiratainment sector of the internet. Previous to that, I found it all, amusing. Like maybe I'm crazy, or stupid or naive. I didn't really believe there were that many people in the world that thought David Icke's reptilian thing was to be taken seriously, right? I didn't take it seriously. I just assumed that most people didn't. I'm wrong. I know now that I'm wrong. And as I started to meet some of those people and realize that I was wrong, I started to really, because of the position I was in, I had probably 50, because I had gone on coast to coast, probably 50% of the people by 2001 that were gathered around the forums that were dedicated to the Aung San game really had become hardcore conspiracy theorists. And they were there, to be believers. And they were, really a big reason why I started to back off and wind it down and say, look, first I had to put out a statement, which actually had always been there on the CD-ROM, called the secret document. It basically said, this is a game. These are the influences. This is what I've been doing, and besides that, I'd done several interviews over the years where I said, out of character, this is what we're doing, da, da, da. And I archived those on my website. I never took them down. I never hid them. They were always there. If anybody had well, first of all, I never thought in my wildest dreams that somebody would read this material and not see the obvious references to things like Church of the Subgenius, and say, oh, this is a joke, or this is a game, or whatever, but it's not to be taken seriously. I never thought that there would be people doing that, but there were. So I told as many people as I thought needed to hear that, you do understand that this is a game. And then I put out a public statement in 2001 that before 9/11 happened that I was going to wind this down. And then 9/11 happened and I said, I'm out. Because I had already actually kind of gone off and started working on the Majestic project with EA. Okay. When 9/11 happened, that project got canned. And they never really publicly said that's why, but privately we were told that's why, because there was already stuff the game had already been written. There was all this money had been poured into shooting video segments, and it all had to do with a renegade, some sort of, what would you call it, a resistance movement that was bombing buildings. It just wasn't stuff that you could do anymore. Just right post 9/11, the cold chill had fallen. This was not funny. This was not even allowed.
Yeah. They weren't even playing Neil Young on the radio.
Yeah, right. It's everything got really tight for a while. And so I wound my game down. The Majestic wound down. I never really got to do the last part of Aung's Hat, which would have been where we had a recap when Game Over was declared, and we all sat on the forums and we talked about what I was most interested in. What was your experience? Each person, I wanted to hear what their experience was, and I wanted everybody to be respectful of everybody's view. And by that time, the forum had become overrun with multiple groups of people who were there for various reasons, all conspiratorial, one or either to prove that what I was doing was part of a government psyop, or they were there because they were claiming that they actually knew that Aung's Hat was real, but that I was an idiot saying it wasn't, so everybody should follow them. And that was 5 or 6 of those groups, and they just all became very chaotic and crazy and ugly. And so I had really started to wonder, well, what's going on here? And so I kind of went silent for a while and just stayed in the background and listened to a lot of what people were saying. And I noticed that there was a very serious right-wing totalitarian chatter that was going on privately with a lot of these conspiracy groups. They'd really taken a hard turn right. And I remember when I first got into conspiracy theory in the 80s, it was mostly like old Kennedy assassination dudes that were turning me on. So it was all very lefty, right? And now all of a sudden there's like this new injection with all the people now coming on the internet with, AOL allowed the whole world to come on the internet, and then the world could just get on the internet. And so it really changed from like the early adopters on the internet, I think were more experimental, left libertarian, lefty, definitely drug-oriented culture. Robert Anton Wilson was big, like Terrence McKenna was huge on the internet at the beginning, Hakeem Bey, like all this stuff was like very kind of counterculture. And then the mainstream people started to come in, and then you started to see this weird, they started to like they started to absorb this conspiracy stuff that was online, and they started to go their own kind of John Birch direction with it. And it was very weird. So I started to see this as a real, something that we should pay attention to.
Because QAnon, to interject real quick, first dropped in October 2017. And
Right.
It crystallized everything that you're talking about and like put it on steroids. And it's like John Birch Society times exponentially whatever now. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it was like all the worst parts of weird conspiracy theories. So it was like flat earth people, which, Discordians used to make fun of like 40 years ago, but like here we are, they're still around. The reptilian agenda, the SRA thing, that got woven in. So like you think of like all the worst things that Alex Jones has ever exploited in the last 20 years. And you kind of stir it all into a big pot and you call it QAnon. I'm watching this and I'm like, okay, well, guess what? I really can't not talk about this. I feel obligated to talk about this because they're using my methods and I don't like that. And on top of it, people had started to say, oh, this is like Ong's hat, which, no, it's not. I mean, it is, but it's not. It follows the formula, but content-wise, it's nothing. And intention-wise, it's definitely nothing like it. So, I put off like retiring from talking about this, and I spent a lot of time in 2020 talking about. There's stuff that's still coming out this month that came from 2020, and all I talked about in 2020 was QAnon. That's all anybody wanted to talk to me about, but that's also all I wanted to talk about because I really felt like there needed to be somebody pointing out that, look, this is something that follows the strategy of an ARG, but it's weaponized. And then like I noticed like later last year when the mainstream media finally started to pay attention to this movement because it's a cult. There's no other way to describe it.
Why is QAnon a cult, right?
Well, it basically is asking you to suspend common sense, to throw critical thinking out the window, and believe these ideas which are unsubstantiated. There's like, and on top of it, there's no way you could substantiate them, right? So I could say right now, I could say somebody's name, and I could say that they're a Satan-worshiping pedophile who's killing children to extract adrenochrome. Okay, I can say that. I can say that on a forum somewhere. If I'm smart, I probably wouldn't do it with my real name attached to it because I could get sued. So I would be anonymous. So I could say anything I want to say. On top of it, what I would do is I would get a bunch of people interested in searching for clues in material that really doesn't have any clues, but it's nebulous material, kind of liminal, so it could mean anything it wants to mean to anybody who wants it to mean something to them. So they're looking for patterns. They're going to find them, right? We know this as Discordians. It's called Starbucks Pebbles. If you're looking for fives, you're going to find fives. If you're looking for 23s, you're going to find 23s. But unfortunately, most people have not read Cosmic Trigger. Most people have not read Principia Discordia. Most people have not read Illuminatus Trilogy. Even some people that have took it seriously. Believe it or not, man, I have met people that I have to call Discordian Orthodox. I can't call them anything else. They really missed the fucking point. I mean, that's just nothing you can do about that. There's always going to be those people. But Q basically is working towards, these days, I don't like, towards the end, I'm not really sure that the Q people that were puppet mastering it even knew what they were working towards other than selling merch. But in the beginning, at least, it was to build a belief system around the cult of Donald Trump, which is a cult of personality. And they were there to really, build his reputation as some sort of do-gooder. Like, Donald Trump's going to ride in on a white horse. He's going to take all these people and the great, what they call it, the Great Awakening, and then the storm is coming, and they're going to round all these people up like Hillary Clinton and her friends are going to put them in prison, and they're going to be public executions and blah, 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 blah. Basically, just like any cult, they were promising something that was never going to happen. There was no way to substantiate that was, there was no provable way to say that this was or was not going to happen. But if you were using your common sense, you could say probably not. But most of these people were using common sense. They were looking for something to believe in, is what they were looking for. And so, just like a cult, you find damaged people that are looking for parental figures. They're looking for love. They're looking for a community. They're looking for all these different things that they feel like they don't have. And instead of looking in the right places right around them, they look in the wrong places. So they end up hooking up with some person who's charismatic or enigmatic. In the case of Q's enigmatic. Charismatic, not so much, because, if you've read these drops, they're pretty uncharismatic, but they're very enigmatic. But they do hit the high points of repeating the slogans. Again, a cult, another quality of a cult, to have simple, digestible slogans. Doesn't matter if they really make that much sense, but there's something that's repeatable, and they seem to make sense because they simplify complex issues to a sentence. So they're bumper stickerisms, right? And so they can repeat them to each other. They can repeat them in large groups and rhythmic shouting and chanting, all the things that make a cult, which is basically a brainwash, a giant brainwash that's happening to a bunch of people, to themselves, collectively, mostly doing it to themselves, because a cult can never be successful unless the cult members are participating willingly in this brainwashing, right? So it's partly the bad intention of a bad actor, i.e. the cult leader, but mostly I would put the blame for what happens with a cult on the shoulders of the cult members, because they're participating, they're not questioning, they're not practicing baby logic, they're like all these things that they're not doing. I don't think we can expect them to be honest with you, because I don't think the ideas of somebody like Robert Anton Wilson, or even different Korjivskian language theories and E-prime and things like that, most people have not been exposed to that, dude. Like, I didn't get any of that stuff in college. So all these people that are having these experiences, they're getting bombarded with this highly sophisticated form of technology that is being weaponized to control them, to mostly separate them from their money, but also to use them in a larger social movement to do stupid things like rush the Capitol, which, worked, it happened. But basically just to have a large group of people that they can manipulate to their ends and means. So, you've got players like Steve Bannon and people like that are more than willing to use those people. But the short story, the short answer, I guess, is a cult is a group of people that are willing to all suspend disbelief together towards a common goal. And, Scientology would fit that description. Christianity would fit that description. And Q fits that description. It's just Q's just the newest player on the stage. That's really the difference.
Okay, all right, folks. Well, that is the show. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that really dope interview with Joesph Matheny, breaking down the cult of QAnon, Weaponized, ARGs, Liberation Found, and different dope works from dope writers and artists like Robert Anton Wilson. Hey, if you want to learn more and read more of Matheny's work, head over to his website right now. It's pretty easy. It's his name, joespphmatheny.com. JoespHMatheny.com. joespphmatheny.com. He's currently 2 books deep into his trilogy, the Liminal Cycle trilogy, which is a super cool transmedia project. Right now, kind of represented in 2 books. The first one is it's called Liminal. The second one is it's spelled XEN, the Zen of the Other. You know what I mean? So maybe it's like Jen or something like that. The Zen of the Other. And I believe the third project, he might be working on it right now. It might be a screenplay and maybe it's a movie. You know what I mean? But, Matheny is a super interesting and exciting artist, so definitely check his website. And, check out my website too, chapelperilous.us, to find out more about my upcoming book, Chapel Perilous, The Life and Thought Crimes of Robert Anton Wilson. I handed in the manuscript to my publishers recently. Things are looking good. We're looking at next fall, I hope, 2023. You know what I mean? So that's going to be a really dope time to release this book. I'm super psyched. It's been a long time in the making, and again, it's a biography of Robert Anton Wilson's life and times. An artist that, I feel grateful to have studied so much of his life and work, because I feel like I learned a lot of how to survive as an artist in the 20th century, now the 21st century. And so I've been posting a lot recently on the website. A lot of these classes that Robert Anton Wilson taught in his final project, the Maybe Logic Academy. So I have about 3 classes of his, multi-week classes, assignments that I've been posting, and then I've been, providing my own commentary on the classes. So that's been pretty cool. So if you're a Robert Anton Wilson fan, this is like the last unwritten book of Robert Anton Wilson. All the stuff he talked about at the Maybe Logic Academy was pretty dope. It was pretty awesome, and it was like reading another Bob book, only you were there writing the book with him, which is pretty cool. Head over to chapelperilous.us to read more about all this dope material. And until then, thank you very much, folks. God bless you. Good night.